Welcome. Great to have you here with us for our July 17th edition of the Clean Commercial Transportation Update. I'm Bill Van Amberg, and as always, I'm joined by my great colleague, Alicia Gildy. We're your hosts for the CCTU. Bonnie Trowbridge has the controls for us today, and Whitley Porter and Casey Okazaki are monitoring questions in chat. And we think you're going to have some questions today. We really encourage you to send them in because this is a really big news week for this industry. On the heels of California adopting the world-leading advanced clean trucks regulation, we now have 15 states plus the District of Columbia who have signed an agreement to develop policies to achieve similarly aggressive bus and truck electrification goals. We've dedicated the webcast to that this week because it's such an important topic. We'll have the executive director of the group who organized this historic agreement joining us, Paul Miller from NESCAUM. We'll hear from the chair of the California Air Resources Board during the course of the webcast today on the import of this agreement and also next steps on ACT. And we'll find out how this aligns with our partners in Europe and how California and the US and its actions can really help bolster and support their plans. But first, as always, Alicia, let's hear from our attendees. What are they thinking about this big step forward today?
Great, thank you so much, Bill, and happy Friday, everyone. Truly excited about today's program and our guests that we have. But first off, let's hear what you think about how important this announcement is for the 15-state Memorandum of Understanding to advance zero-emission trucks and buses. Do you see this as a major development, sets an irreversible direction for electrification? How about an important development critical that the right policies now be put in place to enact it? It's a good announcement, but we want to see the action plans, the real policies, and the incentives first. All right, lastly, sounds bigger than it is. It has no teeth. Let us know what you think here.
You know, it's interesting in talking to some people around the industry. I think what some people are saying is they really do feel like this has sent a pretty clear signal now with 40% of the population of the nation kind of behind this big push and some very specific goals.
Yeah. Bonnie, let's see, what do folks think? All right, the second option here, important development, critical that the right policies now be put in place to enact it. All right, that's a 51% response rate there. Thanks everyone for your good input.
Interestingly, out of that, and we'll move more into that as we move through our webcast today, people were also saying it, most people thought it was pretty darn important. A lot of people though said, sure would also now like to see what's coming next to put teeth on it. All right, let's move into our news before we jump into discussing this big topic of the day. First off, of course, that is the big topic. 30% of zero-emission trucks by 2030 is the sales target the 15 states and DC have committed to, and 100% by 2050. This aligns very closely with California's advanced clean truck rules. What it does, and we'll get into more details in just a moment, is that the states will agree to work together to create a self-sustaining market for zero-emission, medium and heavy-duty vehicles. They'll coordinate strategies and policies through an existing ZEV task force, and they've committed to a pretty fast timeline. We'll get into more details on that, but 6 months to develop an action plan. There are other pieces of news, some of them a little more sobering. This announcement couldn't have come at a better time because a new report also out right now shows that CO2 levels are moving towards a pretty unsustainable point faster than we had even determined before, approaching levels that haven't been seen for 15 million years on the planet. This is before humans were on the planet. This is when temperatures were 3 to 4 degrees Celsius hotter and sea levels were more than 60 feet higher than today. This is a new study from Nature Scientific Reports. But there's good news in the industry. We are making progress, and it's a continuing drumbeat and trend. In Sweden, they've just launched a program to test fuel cell refuse trucks. It's a project that takes fuel cells from PowerCell, puts them in a Renova refuse truck on a Scania truck body, and they'll be testing them in Gothenburg, Sweden, starting next year with funding from the European Union. Hyzon Motors has also opened another facility. They had some in Australia. Now they've opened one in Groningen in the Netherlands. This is where they will be retrofitting fuel cells into truck bodies for the European market. They say they will be building hundreds of these trucks by 2021. And for what we're trying to achieve in terms of greater electrification of trucks, this next story is intriguing, if not yet proven. There is a company in Japan, and made up of some of the leaders who were involved with the Nissan Leaf battery plans, APB, who say they have a new approach to greatly reducing the cost of lithium-ion batteries. The new process would actually take out many of the very expensive components in the batteries in electrodes and electrolyte and replace them with a rosin that could be much more easily manufactured. We'll see if this is true, but they plan to set up first production next year in 2021. So that's all the news really quickly from around the world, but let's kick back into our main topic for the week in the 15-state MOU. Alicia, we've got a great guest with us today to talk about just that.
Oh, we sure do. And I couldn't be more pleased, as I had the honor of working with Paul quite some time ago. Well, you mentioned it in the very beginning of our program today. On Tuesday, July 14th, 15 states came together to sign a memorandum of understanding to develop an action plan that would set forward policies and strategies to require the adoption of zero-emission trucks and buses by 30% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. And we are so lucky to have NESCAUM's Executive Director, Paul Miller, join us today for a conversation. And we're so lucky that we're having him in the week with this big announcement. Paul, wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for being with us today and taking part in this conversation. I know so many people are excited about this and have questions for you, but maybe I'll tee off one first. With this big announcement, what do you think in terms of a market signal, this 30% adoption by 2030, what does that send to industry? How do you think industry is responding to this announcement?
Well, I would hope, and first, thank you, Alicia and Bill, for having me on today, and good morning out in California. I certainly would hope that it provides the kind of signal that gives confidence that if you build it, there will be a market, and that the states and their policies that we are looking for input from groups like your members to provide us as we develop an action plan will provide the basis for jumpstarting or expanding the market as it exists now. I think we may have different end goals in mind, but I think we all want the same thing. We all want cleaner vehicles on the road for a number of reasons, and certainly our states are driven by climate, they're driven by air pollution, they're driven by local air toxics. And the kind of technologies your memberships are developing are completely in line with the policy goals of our states. And I think with this collective group, with many states that have not been active in this area before, that should be a pretty good signal to developers that we're behind you, we want you to succeed.
You know, this really took a lot of coordination, and getting to the 15 states surprised many people just with the collection of states, east and west, that you got. What did it take to pull this partnership together? How did you get 15 states to agree to this pretty aggressive goal?
Yeah, it was part planning and part fortuitous good luck to just the times as they are. But, you know, we have been working, including with CALSTART, since really the early 90s on zero-emission vehicles, light-duty vehicles. We've been working with California for years cooperatively. And we actually brought the California light-duty mandate to New York, Vermont, Massachusetts back in the early 90s. They were the first ones to adopt. So we've had quite a bit of experience working with states, and we have a task force of these states that have adopted the light-duty vehicle program from California. And that was just a natural springboard to then start getting into looking at the medium and heavy duty sector. We need the medium and heavy duty sector as well for all the previous reasons I said. We need it for climate, we need it for air quality, we need it for local air toxics. So we were working with the same states and said, look, you know, we're seeing what's going on in California. We know what we need on our own, regardless of what's going on in California. This is the next step. So let's start thinking about a way to plan it. And as we were doing this, other states, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Hawaii, jumped on board because they saw the merits as well. And so it was part having a plan in place and some experience, plus just the timing was right for other states to see the value of this kind of collective effort.
Are you seeing any interest from other states that would potentially sign on to this MOU?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, I can't say any other states because, yeah, I can't put anybody on the spot. But there's certainly, you all probably know, there are states out there that are looking at the California Light Duty Vehicle Program as well. And so it would be a natural extension to look at medium and heavy duty. It's not a requirement under the MOU to adopt the California Act rule, the Advanced Clean Trucks rule, but that's one option, but there are other ways to do this through incentives, financial or otherwise, and a number of states find that attractive as well. And so I'm thinking we'll get a few more states over time.
That's great.
We'll let you know when they come on board.
Hey, and on that point, I think, and we're getting some questions from the audience as well. I know you don't know what tool set is going to be developed, but over the next 6 months, as the states work on this action plan, Paul, what's on the table? A lot of questions we're getting now on, would the states be willing to provide incentives to get this market going and really help ramp up? Would they be willing to work on infrastructure support? What do you think? What's the sense of the group?
Yeah, so first off, through this next 6 months as we develop the action plan, it's not going to be within the silo of just the states. We're looking at input from the technology developers, other stakeholders. So it's not all us. So our success is as much dependent on your members as it is on the states. And in terms of policies, obviously I mentioned one, but it's not a requirement, is there are states that are interested in adopting the California Advanced Clean Trucks regulation. So that's one option. And certainly there are states that have in the past adopted financial incentives for the purchase of zero emission vehicles. New York State just announced the $700 million electric vehicle incentive package, and that includes infrastructure. So infrastructure is going to be a big deal as part of this. It's a whole maybe magnitude, an order of magnitude different in challenge from light duty because of the loads that are going to be needed to charge fleets. So that's going to be a key area as well. So we're looking, or we're open to looking at whatever good ideas folks have that they think is needed to expand this market, wherever they come from. And we're not just focused on the domestic ideas. We think there are a lot of good ideas across the planet.
Well, Paul, one of the things we'd love to do, if you'd stick around, we want to get some feedback now from Mary Nichols, who you know well from the California Air Resources Board, her observations on the MOU, and then circle back with you with some more questions and from our audience. So can you stay with us?
I will stick around.
Great. Well, so this MOU that Paul and NESCAUM have really launched forward really is such a big extension of the rule California adopted just a couple of weeks ago. We had a chance to sit down briefly yesterday with California Air Resources Board Chair Mary Nichols and get her perspectives on the importance of the MOU and also what she'd like to see from it and next steps from ACT.
The thing that makes this exciting, though, and what we really are hoping to see is a much more effective plan for market support for these vehicles. In the past, the manufacturers, this is more true on the light duty side, I guess, but you know, they would go from state to state and they would say, well, you can't have a ZEV mandate, or your state isn't a good place for us to sell electric vehicles because ... And it had to do with the Public Utilities Commission's regulations on charging and about the the weather conditions and the road maintenance and whether there were subsidies or not. And you know, to the extent that we can all share information about these things, talk about best practices, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and if at all possible, you know, work regionally on things, I think it'll make a big difference in terms of overcoming some of the obstacles that we've faced in the past.
One of the things that you hear from manufacturers, and I know you heard a lot of this leading up to ACT, and you have on other regulations, is, well, California, yes, you're a big market, but you know, you're only a certain percentage of the market. I think the certainty that comes from 40% of the national market is a pretty big signal. Are you hearing any private feedback on that this gives a lot more certainty to manufacturers to be able to not just achieve California's rule, but really invest and lean into this space?
What we have heard is that there's a recognition now that this is real, that ACT is moving forward, regardless of what happens in the November election, et cetera, that people understand, people in the industry understand that with this many states having really signed up, that it means that it will happen. There may be bumps along the road from time to time, but I don't think there's going to be any fundamental turning back at this point.
And no inkling from the Trump administration that they may challenge the ability to do ACT at this point?
No. ACT is solidly grounded in the Clean Air Act authority and the 177 section states authority to take steps that are needed to deal with our air pollution problems. So we're out of the ideological realm of debate about climate change, even though the rule certainly has climate benefits as well. But we're grounded in the public health and the Clean Air Act, and I think we're on very solid ground there.
How can the advanced Clean Truck Rule be a model for the global community? And wondering how CalStart's Global Drive to Zero, how can we help expand the extent of its impact and the benefits that it can bring to other countries?
First of all, I think just spreading the word. I know that, there's an underground network and an overground network of information out there. But when you are talking to the countries and to the agencies that you all talk to, I think they often have detailed, specific questions about what the rule actually is and when and how it takes effect. And in particular, as I know you're going to want to talk to me in a few minutes about what's coming next in terms of NOx and fleet rules. So, having a greater awareness out there among the professionals in this field of what the philosophy is here and the overall action plan, which is something I think, your organization is uniquely well qualified to play a part in. So we hope and expect that you will be key partners in this.
And we pledge to do that and already have started to launch some of those conversations and taking, if you will, a roadshow out to share the news on it. Right. Getting back to California, Mary, because we talked about this as we led into this a little bit, ACT is the first act of a larger package that you're taking forward at the board. Pretty aggressive steps, an omnibus approach. Can you tell us what's next for ACT, for the low NOx rule, for an aggressive fleet rule? What should we expect, and what's the timing? Sure.
Well, the final action on ACT is done, which means it's now in effect, and people are starting to figure out their compliance plans if they hadn't already. And I know many companies were already well aware of what was coming and have started making their plans. The next step is the omnibus NOx rule, which relates to all kinds of engines that use diesel or any other kind of liquid fuel, because we do expect those vehicles are going to be with us for years to come. And as fast as we can go in turning over to zero, we still need everybody else to be doing what can be done with technology. And there's a lot that can be done with technology to reduce overall emissions. So that comes before the board for its initial hearing, and that may be it, or there may be further changes in August. And then early next year, I can't give a date at this point, but it will be shortly after the first of the year, the board will be considering the fleet rule, which has been under development for quite some time, but is more complicated in part because data that we will be getting from the ACT rule is going to be part of what we look at when we come up with the final numbers for which types of fleets are going to be given what types of targets for purchases of zero emission vehicles. So it is a multi-step effort, all moving in the same direction in terms of driving emissions down as fast and effectively as we can. And it's really based on what we've learned over the years, that many years that California has been in the business of regulating vehicles and fleets, is that we think we have a comprehensive approach here which will work better for both the environment and for the regulated industry.
So interesting comments from Mary Nichols, and we thank her again for joining us yesterday. Paul, if you can rejoin us, what do you think the coordination work is going to take on the MOU and bringing in California into the process? Do you really think this can be done in the next 6 months to get that first action plan set?
Yeah, so we're not going to kid ourselves that in 6 months we're going to come up with an action plan that will pave the way for the next 10 years, 5 years. So what we're hoping to do is in the first 6 months, get the easy things out there, the things that really work, that people have seen work. But part of that action plan will probably be identifying things we need to continue to look at as we go forward. And in the MOU itself, we have a 2025 kind of check-in period in which we want to check and see how things are going. I don't think anybody in their right mind would think a 6-month action plan for something we're targeting for 2050 is going to have everything in it, and we certainly don't expect that. So we're trying to get the ball rolling, and we will be taking new and innovative ideas whenever we get them, but this gets us going.
Hey, one of the questions that did come in from, and we've been getting a lot of questions about incentives and very specific details on scrappage, and will you, allow the use of incentives and encourage it? But one of the questions that came in is, how much does this tie into the regional greenhouse gas market structure that already exists in the Northeast? Is that an element? Could that bring in funding, or is it not tied together?
Yeah, but certainly a number of the states that signed on to the MOU are also members of this Transportation Climate Initiative, or TCI, which is a cap and invest initiative. It does not exist just yet, so it's still also in the planning stages. And that is a potential source of funding for incentives for those states that choose to do that. It will be a state-by-state decision on how they use, if the program goes forward, how they use the funding. There is a electric sector cap and invest program already in a number of the Northeast states, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI. A number of states are targeting those kind of investments into energy efficiency. And first it was electricity, now they're getting to thermal efficiency. That also is a state-by-state choice, but the legislature, to the extent that they want to do that, could look at investing in other things. It will be up to the states, but those kind of initiatives that really do help push innovation and reduce greenhouse gas emissions wherever they can occur, can raise funds to invest in these kind of things. So it's certainly possible. And I do want to say, just real quick, the VW funds from the emissions cheating, a number of states are using that already for infrastructure and purchase of things like electric buses. So that's an option out there too. Great,
Paul, because I think that is a tool set that the Northeast uniquely has, but VW, you're right, is national. That is another tool set.
Yeah.
Paul, this has been really great. Your leadership is so welcomed for this important effort with the 15 states and hopefully more that come on board. Thank you so much for being such an incredible partner. I know that CalSTART is looking forward to being a partner, and certainly through our Global Drive to Zero, we want to continue working with you. Thank you so much for your time today and for joining us, and we'll definitely want to continue bringing you in on our program so we can get updates and see how we can bring our clean transportation community together to help support this important effort. So thank you so much, Paul, for joining us.
Thank you. And we welcome the interaction.
Thank you, Paul.
Great. Well, Bill, we have another wonderful interview with one of our international partners through the Global Drive to Zero program. Our very own Cristiano Pesania had a great interview with Sita Holtslag, who is the Senior Advisor for Sustainable Mobility under the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. She's also the chair of the Community of Interest on the Urban Freight for the Transport Decarbonization Alliance. Bonnie, let's go ahead and play this interview.
For city logistics, there's going to be a zone of zero-emission logistic vehicles, so that only zero-emission vehicles will be allowed to enter with some exemptions in 30 to 40 cities by 2025 also. That's basically all major cities in the Netherlands, since we're not such a big country, as you may know. And then something else, it's not strictly policy, but it's very Dutch, is what we have is like public-private partnerships and covenants. So we call these green deals or covenants, and these are agreements that aren't legally binding in that way as legislation is, but it's a very powerful instrument that we use to kind of align front runners around a specific topic or a niche. So for logistics, we have 3 of these kind of either green deals or covenants or agreements. One is on waste vehicles, so refuse vehicles. So all refuse vehicles will be zero emission, all cleaning vehicles will be zero emission by 2030. What we call special purpose taxis, I think in the States they would be called school buses. So all the transport that is paid for by public money will also be zero emission by 2025. So these are small kind of buses, smaller buses than the regular buses, and construction and mobile machinery logistics. So these are all kind of not policy legislation per se, but public-private partnerships that are very successful in the Netherlands in a way. And I think one of the strong points in the Netherlands in rolling out zero-emission vehicles, also for passengers, is the charging infrastructure. So there's a very good coordination, national coordination, and it's multi-stakeholder to make sure that charging infrastructure is not an obstacle in rolling out zero-emission vehicles.
So which areas would you say the Netherlands would most benefit from international collaboration and initiatives as Drive to Zero? And also, how do you see action in clean commercial vehicles in California and other regions in Europe supporting the Netherlands' objectives to cleaner commercial vehicle fleets?
Yeah, that's super important. So the Netherlands is a really small country, as you know, and European activities in this is essential, is crucial. So we don't have, for example, an automotive industry or a very big automotive industry. So we're very dependent for reaching these goals also on what happens in the global and the European market. So within Europe, there is now the CO2 reduction target that is in place. But within, for example, the ZEF Alliance, so that's the ZEF Policy Lab, which is bringing together kind of the front runner policy learnings from California, the Netherlands, and China. There was a comparison made, and one of the success factors that we saw, and now especially in California, is that besides these CO2 standards, ZEF mandate is very effective in these other regions. So that's something, that's interesting to see what other front runners are doing in that space. And having these global partnerships to move together this market as a whole, I think is crucial for us to meet our own national deadlines and targets. And both the European coalition there and working together within Europe, but also working together with other front runners. And I think that's where Drive to Zero really, helps us in a way connect all those dots in all those different areas. Definitely.
So Sita has been a great partner with us in our Drive to Zero program, and they're doing some pretty amazing things we can learn from in the Netherlands in particular. And their tool chest is so interesting, Alicia. I think it almost keys up the questions we should be maybe asking as our final poll about what policies might work.
Yes, Bonnie, let's go ahead and pull that up. I know we always wish we had so much more time to discuss. Certainly with our special guest, it was great to have Paul today. Would like to hear from our attendees what policies and strategies are critical to meeting the 15-state MOU medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicle goals. Again, this is looking at 30% adoption by 2030. So our options here are prioritization of zero emission vehicles in disadvantaged communities. How about point of sale vehicle voucher incentive programs? I think we've been seeing a lot of that in the questions and the chat. Also, how about phased manufacturer sales requirements for zero emission trucks and buses? Certainly we've seen this with the ACT rule. How about phased fleet zero emission vehicle adoption requirements? And then lastly, zero emission delivery zone requirements for urban centers and freight hubs. What do you think? What should go into that important action plan to meet these critical goals?
And Paul made it pretty clear that one of the things they really want is for people and industry and fleets and others to weigh in and to help them and guide them on what policies really would be meaningful to help meet these tough goals. But they intend to meet the goals.
That's great. All right, Bonnie, let's see what folks said. All right, so it looks like 47% point of sale vehicle voucher incentive programs is top on the list, followed by 40% zero emission delivery zone requirements for urban centers and freight hubs. Pretty good distribution of interest here across the different options, but really appreciate the great feedback from our attendees today. Bill, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Alicia. And that was very interesting because it just shows a blend of what we're doing in the US and what's being done in Europe. And maybe that's the best of the worlds we need to start pulling together. Well, very exciting week for all of us and news for this industry. But once again, as Alicia said, our time is coming to a close. Next week, join us again. We'll be taking a closer look at some of the innovative work being done in infrastructure for fast charging hubs for commercial vehicles in Sweden. That's an update from our Drive to Zero program. But for now, thanks for joining us. I'm Bill Van Amberg for Alicia Gildy and our great team here at CalSTART. Please, with the new guidelines coming out in a number of states and regions for COVID, please be safe. Take care of yourself, take care of others. We hope to see you again right here next week, next Friday, for Clean Commercial Transportation Update. Goodbye.